Wakhan Corridor is one of the most isolated high plateaus of the Pamirs, and due to this isolation, it remains to be one of the few places on Earth that offers a fascinating combination of untouched nature, pristine culture of Wakhi and Kyrgyz nomads, unexplored valleys, and unclimbed peaks. The complete corridor is embraced by mighty mountain ranges, by the Hindu Kush, the Great Pamir, the Karakoram, as well as the Little Pamir, that reaches as far as to the Chinese border. In July 2012, we set off on an expedition with the goal to traverse the complete Wakhan corridor, from west to east, past Lake Chakmaktin, to explore side valleys of the Aksu range of the Little Pamir, and try to ascend one of those nameless and unclimbed giants of rock and ice. Situated in the province of Badakhshan, Wakhan is the most northeastern tip of Afghanistan and borders to Tajikistan, China, and Pakistan. It forms a narrow corridor with a length of 300 kilometers and a width of just 17 kilometers at its narrowest point and just 60 kilometers at its widest point. Here we have to obey to the registration at the tourism office, state police, and border troops. If something works in Afghanistan, it must be bureaucracy. But now we start the next 200 kilometers with 2 hired cars.
Yes.
The bad condition of the gravel tracks and many river crossings is a big challenge for any Jeep and takes us 2 full days. Despite 4-wheel drive, we get stuck in every element that exists in this area. No matter if there are deep mud holes in the dirt track or sand dunes, pushing and shoveling is needed to get the Jeep free again until we finally reach Sarhat-e-Bolgil at an altitude of 3,200 meters, dead end of any motorable track and start of our 5-day trek. The lower western Wakhan corridor is inhabited by the Wahi people, who make their living by agricultural farming mostly. They are Ismailites, a very liberal form of Shia belief. Their spiritual leader, the Aga Khan, strongly supports education for boys and girls alike, and women are not necessarily covered by a veil. We receive great hospitality by the locals, and they assure us that more visitors and tourists are highly welcome to the Wakhan corridor.
خرابتا نبینم یعنی پدر ایت مرد پوست میکنه در خارج هستی تاری پوست کردن
بله
به شکت است
بله.
On our arrival, more than 20 locals come to our place to hope for an engagement as horse drivers with their animals. 7 people and their horses get chosen to accompany us on the strenuous trek on the next 5 days up on the high plateau to reach the Kyrgyz nomadic settlements. Right from the start, we have to overcome the first challenge, Daly's Pass, with an altitude of 4,200 meters. We can feel our lack of acclimatization and struggle with the altitude on the first day.
Ich würde sagen anstrengend, besonders anstrengend mit Antibiotika im Körper. Aber der Pass, der hat schon in sich gehabt.
Die Höhe spüren wir schon, oder?
Definitiv.
Brutal, oder?
Wir sind noch nicht akklimatisiert.
Ja.
Wir brauchen noch ein paar Tage.
The last existing bridge in this area simplifies crossing the river. But even the locals only trust so much into the construction that they only go one by one at a time. From now on, we have to ford all the rivers by foot on our own. Accompanied by ongoing steep saw-teeth-like ups and downs, this is a challenge to our stamina. The higher we get, the more inhospitable becomes the terrain. The only people we meet from time to time are traders. The yak and horse caravans link the trade between the settled Wakhi with their farming and the nomadic Kyrgyz with their livestock. Behind every river bending, the landscape of the valley changes from arid rock desert to grasslands full of flowers of wild onions, or eroded canyons like a maze shimmering in rainbow colors. We finally meet the first Kyrgyz nomads in their yurt camp at Kashkoz at an altitude of 4,150 meters. This campsite consists of 5 yurts. Oji Osman, the village eldest, allowed us to camp on his ground. Here we need to change from horses to yaks for the next day, since the pastures are owned by different Kyrgyz clans. Foreign cattle are not allowed to trespass the grazing grounds without prior permission. As a side effect of this, the tourist money is evenly distributed between the different clans so that everybody profits from the rare tourists that pass through this area.
So we don't have to change the yaks in the other village? No, just take that and go a little bit up?
Our Wakhi horsemen return home to Sarhad, but not without persistently renegotiating their wages for the tour. At least we reach a quick agreement with the Kyrgyz for the next day.
Also so wie es aussieht, können wir mit den Yaks jetzt bis zum nächsten Dorf gehen und dann so weit wie es geht halt ins Tal hinein.
Ja, bis zum Basecamp kommen wir nicht, wie wir geplant haben. Ne?
Ja, die haben ja gesagt, dass so große Steine da
Die
liegen.
Steine, die Tiere kommen nicht rein.
On the following day, 3 Kyrgyz from Kashkoz accompany us on their horses. The proud Kyrgyz horse people would never walk by foot. They lead the yaks packed with our gear. Those mighty yak bulls are true beasts of burden and easily match 800 kilograms of weight. They are stubborn but well-tempered, and so robust and sure-footed on difficult terrain that they get along well with the altitude.
Und wie werden die original bayerischen Chapati, Andi?
Fehlt nur noch der Senf.
Fehlt nur der Senf und die Weißwurst.
We reach Bozai Gumbas, famous for the tombs of Kyrgyz kings. One of the local rulers of the Kyrgyz died here in battle against raiders from Hunza, who came over Wakhir Pass from Pakistan to rob the Kyrgyz caravans. From recent past, we find the last remains from the Russian invasion. Eroded stances and trenches with rusty barbed wire were set up to defend the Mujahideen from entering Afghanistan over Wakhir Pass. Locals tell us about a former Russian military camp that hosted 500 soldiers, but this part of Afghanistan was mostly spared from all military conflicts. Even Taliban omitted Wakhan corridor in their heydays before 2002. We continue deeper into Aksu Valley. Here we are taken by surprise by meeting a herd of Bactrian camels at this altitude, but Kyrgyz use them for caravan transport, and a thick winter coat protects them from the rough weather conditions in winter. The terrain becomes smoother and turns into a steppe with gentle grass hills, a blessing compared to the steep up and down climbs of the first 3 trekking days. Finally, we reach Lake Chakmaktin, a lake about 8 kilometers of length. But the swamp and bloodthirsty mosquitoes, which ambush us at an altitude of above 4,000 meters, deny any closer access to the scenic body of water. The Kyrgyz of the Pamirs are Turkic nomadic people, roaming through Tajikistan, China, and Afghanistan with their herds of sheep, goats, and yaks since centuries, according to the seasons for summer and winter camps and best grazing grounds. All this came to a sudden end during the Great Game in the 19th century, when the imperial powers of Russia and Great Britain were close to collide in Afghanistan in their race of worldwide expansion. To avoid a military conflict, they decided on an arbitrary buffer zone according to the Durand Line between colonial India, now Pakistan, and Tsaristic Russia, now Tajikistan, which led to today's borders of Wakhan Corridor. With the rise of the Communist Soviet Union, the pressure for integration and settlement by force rose on the nomadic Kyrgyz, who preferred their independence and fled into the Afghan Pamir. The upcoming communism in China sealed the last free border. The freedom-loving Kyrgyz were suddenly locked up between the world powers on the roof of the world, Wakhan Corridor. From now on, the nomads were completely isolated from the outer world and their cross-border migrations were denied. The Kyrgyz of the Pamirs were all of the sudden prisoners of the barren Wakhan High Plateau, the last refuge for free nomadic living according to the traditions of their elders. Past Chakmaktin Lake, we arrive at the yurt camp of ENGL, and here again we witness the great hospitality of the Kyrgyz nomads. Buto Boy, the chief of the clan, invites us to stay overnight in a yurt. Every passenger is offered bread and tea, mostly salty yak butter tea. Even during Ramadan, travelers like us are allowed to eat and drink during the daytime to recover from the exertions of the trip. The name affix of Boy means owner of the cattle. Due to his wealth and influence compared to the normal stock farmers and herders, the Boy embodies the position of the clan chief. The high plains receive a lot of water, but extreme altitude and tough weather conditions don't allow any farming on this barren soil and arid lands. The Arctic winter lasts for 6 months and can badly decimate the livestock, which is a big problem since Kyrgyz nomads completely depend on their cattle. All needs are covered by stock farming or by trade with their products. Kyrgyz women are dressed in gorgeous clothes even during the daily job routine, richly decorated with silver jewelry, necklaces, amulets, and coins, which cover most of their red dresses. The locals follow their daily work as we arrive, milking sheep, goats, yaks, and processing milk to cheese that gets dried under the open sky.
No problem. Thank you.
Married women wear a white scarf over their head cover. Unmarried women are recognized by wearing red veils. In both cases, faces are not necessarily covered by those veils. Their isolated homeland and lack of any health care lead to an extremely high infant mortality rate, and due to complications of delivery, women often die while giving birth. This is directly related to a high bride price of around 300 sheep that leave behind many unmarried men. Wool gets battered and prepared for further working steps. From wool, they produce ropes, yurt cover, and clothes. A yak caravan to the closest Wahi settlement takes at least a troublesome 5 days' march. Cheese, meat, and livestock are traded for flour, rice, tea, sugar, and all other goods the Kyrgyz cannot produce by themselves. Since there are no trees or bushes at that altitude, yak dung gets collected, formed into handy plate-sized chunks, and piled up as burning material once it is dried. Milk, yogurt, curd, cheese, meat, and leather are essential products. Especially the durable dried hard cheese called kurd is a substantial food for the winter season. It is seen as a kind of medicine and a transportable and durable good made for trade. The enormous effort it takes for the nomads to bake fresh bread and to cook a fresh tea give us a bad conscience. But exactly this amazing hospitality and the strong solidarity under the most difficult living conditions is exactly the greatest good in this society. We enter the side valley southeast of Chakmaktin Lake. At 4,500 meters, we find the last grassy spot with a glacier stream at the foot of a mighty moraine, which makes a perfect base camp. From here, we start further explorations and scout for possible lines of ascent. For the next 3 consecutive days, we carry our loads up on the glacier basin to set up a depot. Different to the moderate entry of the valley, the way from the base camp on was made of the worst moraines possible. Hours of stone stepping from block to block with heavy loads makes progress hard. Finally, we secure a route over the glacier. At the far end of the glacier basin, we discover a neve slope on the west face that leads to the summit ridge like a white staircase to heaven. This was our route. From the base camp, the route leads over the end of the glacier with snowshoes. Still early in the day, the snow is hard and stable. We set up our high camp at 5,200 meters, close to the neve slope, protected from possible rockfall and snow slabs.
Den tun wir da drauf. Und so köcheln wir vor uns hin jetzt. Der Marius sitzt draußen. Der will unbedingt Biwak machen, ja. Tja, wer darauf steht.
Ich will dazu sagen, dass es nur daran liegt, dass ihr schon seit 2 Wochen euch nicht mehr gewaschen habt. Ja? Da schlafe ich lieber da draußen allein.
Das muss man aushalten können, Marius.
Naja, im Zelt zu schlafen ist was für harte Männer, ich weiß. Ich bin zu weicheich, da schlafe ich lieber draußen.
Marius biwakiert im Hochlager auf 5200 Meter lieber draußen als mit uns im Zelt. Das sagt einiges aus.
Das sagt was aus. Wie lange habt ihr euch nicht gewaschen?
Wie lange sind wir unterwegs? Sagen wir so. Das ist die Antwort.
Genau. Gute Nacht.
Gute Nacht, Marius.
Summit day starts with a surprise, realizing that we had overslept by 2 hours, ignoring the alarm clock. After a quick preparation, we rope up in 2 teams and start at around 4 o'clock. At the top of the fern wall, the rising sun reaches the summit ridge and temperatures rise quickly under a clear, deep blue sky.
Die letzte Meter von den Gipfeln
Das sind die schwersten.
sind schon gut über 5600 Meter. Es fehlen uns vielleicht noch 100 Meter zum Gipfel. Der will aber nicht näher kommen. Es kostet die letzte Kraft.
Die letzten 5 Meter zum Gipfel.
500!
Die letzten 5.
Du lügst.
Jetzt haben wir's. Gipfelerfolg in Afghanistan, mein Freund. Na? So muss er sein. Da kommt die nächste starke Seilschaft.
At around 9 o'clock, we reached the summit.
Geil!
Our GPS devices measure a height of 5,725 meters.
Super gemacht, Marius.
Super geil.
Ganz stark.
Holt die Mädels noch hoch.
Wow! Wow!
Yay! Good teamwork.
To the east, the panoramic view goes straight into the neighboring valley of Telgan Korum and further over the peaks of the Little Pamir as far as to the Chinese border. An incredible panorama under a clear blue sky reaches to the south as far as to the 7,000-meter peaks of Pakistan, such as Pasusar, Baturasar, and Shishpare. We enjoy the wonderful moment on the summit. We want to spend a day of recovery in base camp and think about further climbs in the valley, when we suddenly received the disturbing message by satellite phone about turmoil with casualties in the Tajik border town of Korog that we would have to pass on our way back. Problems at the border were predicted, so we decided to descend all the way to the Kyrgyz nomads in their yurt settlement of ENGL. Despite bad news in mind, we don't want to leave without a decent finish of our expedition. We bargained with the clan chief John Boy for the price of a sheep, since we would like to celebrate the end of our successful expedition with a proper meal together with all people of the yurt camp.
We will pay.
Das ist schon mal gut. Ich habe alles andere hier.
We come to an agreement and the sheep get slaughtered halal style. Since meat is not on the daily menu, the clan leader John Boy insists on preparing the sheep brain as the major delicacy by himself. He fries the animal head from all sides over the open fire. The Kyrgyz cooking matches the tough conditions of life. The recipes are simple, and the food is fatty to cover the high calorie consumption. During the feast, we willingly give advantage to the locals for the brain, while we focused on other delicacies. With this delicious feast, we want to say thank you to our hosts, who gave us unique inside views into their culture of the last Kyrgyz nomads of Afghanistan.
Schmeckt dir das?
Das ist Leber. Schmeckt super gut und ist auch gesund.
We want to thank all the helpful and hospitable people we met on our way through Tajikistan and Afghanistan. We cannot say if their self-sufficient and independent way of life will sustain in the future of Afghanistan, or if the temptation of an allegedly more comfortable modern way of city life will become prevalent. We can only hope that the Kyrgyz nomads will retain their independence in the future. Tashakor and Spasiba.
Super.
Yo